Daredevil is the best superhero show of all time, and here's why. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Daredevil Netflix Marvel TV show. I recently just finished watching it for the first time. I know I'm late, but it's better late than never. This video is going to be me going over 5 different things. I'm going to be talking about my overall show review, season 1, season 2, and then season 3 review, and then finally I'll give you guys my final thoughts and what I think they should do with the characters moving forward on the Disney Plus shows and in the MCU. But yeah guys, without wasting any more time, let us get right into it talking about Daredevil. Now, I've been waiting for this for the longest time. I've been pushing to finish the show, and if you guys don't know, I have COVID right now, so I've been self-isolating, so I've just been watching Daredevil. I watched like 6.5 to 7 hours of Daredevil straight yesterday. There were so many moments in which I just kind of forgot about what I was watching. I felt so immersed into the world, and in talking about that, I just want to talk about the overall show. So this is going to be my overall show review. I think this show is so perfect. There's many small things that I can nitpick about, and those are prominent in season 2 mostly. But starting it off on my list of stuff I want to talk about, I want to start off with the cinematography. Now, a lot of people know that this show is beautifully crafted. This is one of the best looking, if not the best looking, Marvel project. And I'm not going to specifically say MCU, because technically Kevin Feige said it's not canon, but we know about the Kingpin thing in Hawkeye. We know about Daredevil and Spider-Man No Way Home. There's just so much stuff. I'm gonna just say Marvel Universe so that it doesn't get too collided. And I know everyone's going to argue in the comments about that. But nevertheless, I think the cinematography is honestly peak cinematography and just television overall. I think this show and Breaking Bad have phenomenal cinematography, and overall the show is just really beautiful. Even though season 2 wasn't the best writing wise because there was just so much going on, I will say the cinematography in season 2 is absolutely beautiful. I also love the acting. The acting in every single season is phenomenal. I think Matt Murdock is probably a top 5 comic book character acting or casting of all time. I think he's so great. Karen Page, Deborah Ann Wolf, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She is so awesome. The guy who plays Foggy, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but the guy who plays Foggy is also great. The guy who plays Punisher, the girl who plays Elektra, the guy who plays Dex, Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio is absolutely awesome. Even Vanessa in season 3 barely has any screen time, but she's still absolutely awesome. Agent Nadim is, oh my god, he blew my mind. One of my favorite side characters of all time, but I'll talk about that when I talk about season 3. Now, I think the best thing about this show, aside from all the stuff I just mentioned, best thing in this show is Daredevil's writing. Now, he won't kill, but in season 3, he's really pushed to. Like, in season 1, he's not really. I think it's because he's in his early days of Daredevil, of course. But in season 2, when he initially meets Elektra really kind of tries to shift his mind. And she's kind of like, she's pushing him to the limit to what he knows and what he wants to do. And I really love that whole transition. And I love how it's not like within one season itself. I think after, obviously, season 2, going into season 3, he has that realization. And honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I did not watch Daredevil. I didn't watch Defenders between season 2 and season 3, so that might influence my opinion a little bit, but I don't really think it does because I thought season 3 was phenomenal. And anyway, it would probably only hurt my opinion if I didn't like, or it would probably only hurt my thoughts on season 3 if I didn't like Defenders. But I didn't watch Defenders. I just watched a recap, so I know that Matt dies at the end and then he comes back because the building fell on him and all that kind of stuff. He's alive, but he's dead. The intro to season 3 I thought was absolutely perfect, but I want to talk about that when I get to season 3. But back to Daredevil's writing. I love that he's really pushed to the edge. That's one of my favorite things about his character. But what makes a hero to me is the fact that they won't cross that line. But in Daredevil season 3, we really get to that line. This is the deepest I've ever seen a character go so far towards the line that it's oh my god, he's actually gonna cross the line. He's gonna do it. He's gonna kill Kingpin. Obviously, he doesn't end up killing Kingpin, but I feel like the line is actually there. For example, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. When Bucky's actually punching the living crap out of Captain America, I know that Captain America isn't gonna die. And it's not the same exact situation, but in terms of pushing the boundaries, I think that is the limit. I think it matches the same thing, the same exact idea, I guess you could say, when it comes to writing. And not killing is the whole journey for Daredevil, in my opinion, in the show, just because overall every season has its own storyline, it has its own subplots, which by the way are phenomenal. I'll talk about each subplot in each season later, but every single season has their own subplots, they have their own plots, they have their own character stories. But one thing that stays there the entire time is Daredevil's journey to learn who he is. This goes into the religion stuff, which I'll talk about later, which I really genuinely love in this show. But I think what kind of drives the audience to like this character so much is the fact that throughout the entirety of the journey, he's so vulnerable, and I don't think other heroes really have that at all. Obviously, it's not like, I'm not saying vulnerable as in I think Daredevil. I'm not saying vulnerable as in I think Daredevil's gonna die, but I feel as if Karen could die by Kingpin, or Karen could die from Dex, and that in turn makes Daredevil vulnerable. We saw near the end of season 3 when he heard that Kingpin was going after Karen for killing his best friend. We saw Daredevil, like we heard the pain. We didn't see it. We heard the pain in his body. Like we literally heard him like start shivering because he heard that Fisk is going after Karen. Dex is going after Karen. It's so insane to me how they translate all these feelings from just words. It's not even necessarily the acting, but the writing itself really brings me in. And that's another reason why I watched like 6.5 to 7 hours of Daredevil the other day to finish it off. It's because I felt so immersed into the world. And I know that sounds cheesy, but a lot of shows can't do it for me. Even The Boys, one of my favorite shows of all time, it doesn't really immerse me into the world just because obviously it's realistic how heroes would actually be, but to me it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel realistic to me. This feels realistic. It feels like a hero's loved one could die, and in turn the hero dies, like inside, like he loses a piece of himself. So overall, I think the writing really helped this show, not only for the main character, but also elevated all of the side characters, just the connection to Daredevil and Matt Murdock. Another thing that I didn't write down here, I don't know how I forgot it, but just the balance of the lawyer side of things and then the hero side of things. I think season 1 did that the best, obviously just because Foggy and Nelson was still a thing. Towards season 2, I felt like it was more realistic in that Matt couldn't keep up with his responsibilities, but in terms of season 3, it was completely gone. There was nothing of that sort, but I like that in season 3 because it matched it. I was really scared that when they broke off Foggy and Nelson in the middle of season 2, that they would just go right back to it at the end of season 2, or like that would kind of be a resolution. But it's not. They're friends, they're nice to each other, but at the same time, it's not like as cheesy as it is like, oh, like it's a reunion, they're getting back together. It makes sense at the end of season 3 for that to happen because everything's resolved. Matt Murdock didn't kill, and he proves to himself that he won't kill and that he's a good person again because he believed himself that he was a bad person, that he was a betrayer of God. And so overall, I think that the writing in that sense of the balance of stuff, it works really well when it needs to. Going back to the vulnerable thing, I want to talk about emotion and death in this show, and this all is just an underlying factor of the phenomenal writing and the screenplay in this show. Also the direction. I've never heard the director's name for this show, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't even looked it up yet, but whoever the director / showrunner is, thank you, because you made an absolutely phenomenal show. And obviously he or she doesn't get enough credit because I don't hear their names at all anywhere. But yeah, the emotion and death that's shown in this show is absolutely phenomenal. They kill so many people, like for example, like Ben Urich in the first season. They killed him off so brutally from Fisk. He literally choked him to death. They killed him so brutally that I felt like anyone could die, and that is when I really got engaged to the show. When Ben Urich died, I was like, oh my god, anyone or their mother or their father or their sister, even young, there was no mercy in the show is basically what I'm trying to say. It was non-stop action. So some moments I wrote down where I thought that people could die was Karen could die from Dex in the church scene, but obviously the priest guy dies instead. I thought that Daredevil would literally kill Fisk, but he didn't end up doing that. Obviously, I had faith in my hero, but the writing made it seem like Daredevil was about to cross the line, which I love because the writing really manipulated us into thinking that Daredevil would cross the line, but he doesn't, and that's what makes him one of the best heroes out there in my opinion. I also thought Nadeem could die at any moment. Honestly, I thought Nadeem would die way earlier than he actually did, just because there were so many close calls where I thought Dex would just absolutely obliterate the man. I mean, at the end of the day, he did obliterate the man, but I felt like he could die at any time. I also felt like Nadeem's family was at so much risk throughout the entirety of season 3, and just our intro to to Nadim at the end of episode 1 in season 3, the way we connect to his family was really odd to me. Like, I never not odd as in it was bad. I meant like odd as in like I never expected to have such a connection to his family, and for that reason I was like, dang, his wife or his kid, someone has to die. Like that, why else would they be connecting us to him? But at the end of the day, he dies, and then his family has to suffer the repercussions. My only thing with Nadim's family that I'm thinking of right now that I never thought of before was I kind of wish that we got to see his family, like hear about his death or something like that in the plane or like in the airport or when they get to Dubai, since they flew away. But overall, I love that as well. And then honestly, just the endless possibilities. This show is so well written that I think overall anything in this show, whether it was suspenseful or not, it always felt important to me, and I think that's why the writing's so good. But like I mentioned before, I want to talk about the religion aspect of the show, and it's not necessarily religion as much as it is belief, but that's kind of what I think is the main driving factor for me to love this show so much, is just like I mentioned before, Daredevil's writing relies a lot on his religion. He's Catholic, if I'm not mistaken, and he believes that everyone has redemption, but at the end of the day, he doesn't want to believe that he himself can be redeemed. In season 2, there's like a massive 10 to 15 minute sequence, I think, of just Daredevil and Punisher on the roof talking about if people deserve redemption, why or why not. And it literally felt like a school debate to me. It was so cool to watch, and I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite monologues / dialogues in any TV show ever. And that was really like the heart to heart to me, like with the show, when I realized that it's not necessarily pushing religion as much as I thought, instead it was like pushing belief, I guess. It's kind of, what do you believe, and will you stick with that when you're at the lowest of your lows? Do you think you'll still respect the religion and the belief that you've been following your whole life? Is the religion the same? Is your belief the same your entire life? Have you grown out of it? There's just so much to me that really came together, not only in season 1 and 2, but also in season 3 when it all came together and Matt realized that is what makes him him, is just keeping his belief and believing that people have a second chance. He didn't want to kill Vanessa at the end of season 3, but obviously he had to threaten Fisk, because then Fisk would try to escape. Fisk would try to hurt Foggy and Karen. But yeah, moving on now. That was a lot. I spoke a lot there, but I love the show, man. So moving on, I want to talk about just all the side characters of the show. I'm not going to go into specifics because I'm going to talk about specific side characters in each season review. But yeah, all the side characters overall: Dex, Nadim, Karen, Foggy, Punisher, Elektra, and Maggie. They're all phenomenal characters. I've said phenomenal about 15 times throughout this video so far, and we're only like 10-15 minutes in. I love the side characters in this show. I think they're all awesome, but I don't want to talk too much specifically about them. So now we're going to be moving on to the season 1 review of Daredevil. Okay, so let's start off with the villain, Wilson Fisk. He is one of the best Marvel villains, live action Marvel villains I've ever seen. The way that they flesh out his character in just one season makes him feel like he's not even a villain. Like, obviously he has villain motives, he has villainous ideas, but it feels like no other show really does this, and they don't really flesh him out as if he's the main protagonist, you know? They flesh out Wilson Fisk so much, and not to mention the cinematography in Wilson Fisk's childhood. The way that they shoot all of that is just so beautiful, and then the way they show reminiscence of that in his current day life in season 1 was also awesome. The way that they show the back and forth, and the way that they show how everything is just the same except he's just rich. He's just at the top now, but all he can do is still remember his past. But overall, if you sided with Wilson Fisk, you definitely have an issue. But if you sided with Wilson Fisk in terms of you feel bad for him, for that reason, I think I would kind of agree with you, because I think there is still reason to feel bad for Wilson Fisk, and I think they told his story in the way that I think we should feel bad for him. I mean, if you don't feel bad for the guy, at least a little bit, I'm not saying I don't feel bad, he killed his father, come on now, but you still have to feel a little bit of sympathy for him. He's gone through a lot. Same thing with Dex, but I think Dex was just a completely different situation, as kind of Kingpin was moving the pieces around him to kind of make him go crazy and become more of an absolute killer. But yeah, moving on, I want to talk about the side characters in season 1. Karen, Foggy, and Ben. So Ben Urich is probably the first one I want to talk about, just because he had the most minimal role compared to Karen and Foggy. I thought that Ben Urich's role in this show was really minimal, and apparently he was like a pretty big character in the comics, and people were skeptical when they put him into the show because a lot of mainstream audiences wouldn't really know about him. But I really like Ben's character. Also, if you guys didn't know, I don't read Daredevil comics. I'm gonna buy a few. I'm gonna read a few after I finish while recording this, because I'm really excited to get more into the Daredevil lore and stuff like that. But Ben Urich as a whole, I thought he was a phenomenal character. His relationship to Karen Page. Karen Page is one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the show. I love the balance between all of the side characters as well. It doesn't feel like some are like way ahead of others. Like obviously there's like smaller side characters like the police chief and what's his name, Kingpin's best friend that died from Karen. Like there's all these other smaller side characters that are cool, but these are just the main three that I liked a lot. Moving on to Karen, I thought Karen's absolutely phenomenal. I thought the relationship with Karen and Matt Murdock, like the love interest, I thought that would be way earlier, but it wasn't, and I don't really mind that. I thought that Karen is just, I just think Karen's such a badass, I'm gonna be honest. Like throughout the entirety of the show, not just season 1, but season 1 really shows how much of a badass she is. I kind of wish that we got more of her backstory. We have that one episode in season 3, I think it's like episode 10 or 11 or something like that, where we see like all of Karen's backstory, and with her dad, the diner, her brother, her boyfriend, we see all of that. I wish we got a little more glimpses of that in season 1, but other than that, I really love Karen's character. Foggy Nelson, the GOAT himself, okay? Foggy is absolutely a banger character. The guy who plays Foggy is awesome. I'm sorry, I don't know the guy's name, but the guy who plays Foggy, absolutely amazing actor. My only issue is that with Foggy is that it felt like they were really pushing for his importance in season 1, and he has the majority of screen time in season 1. In my favorite episode of season 1, we'll just talk about later. But overall, I do think that Foggy Nelson is just an absolutely well-written character in season 1. I feel like in season 2 and 3 he really gets put on the back burner, and I don't really like that, just for the character specifically, because I think the character has so much potential with his relationship to Matt Murdock. And obviously I think if we had future seasons, I think it would have been fleshed out more, because obviously by the time end of season 3, Foggy's seen what Matt has gone through, and he also knows about the Daredevil thing and all of that, and I feel like he doesn't have such a cold heart towards it, because even in season 2, when they're fighting for the Punisher case, Foggy still seems to have some sort of like really, really bad tone against Matt for being Daredevil, and he doesn't want him to do it just because it's super unsafe. But overall, I think that Foggy's a great character. I just wish they utilized him a little bit more. But moving on to the acting, I think the acting that stands out in this season specifically is Wilson Fisk, Karen Page, and Matt Murdock / Daredevil. But yeah, the acting, I just think overall Vincent D'Onofrio is also one of my favorite comic book hero castings, or comic book villain castings of all time. He's honestly up there with Heath Ledger, like not acting wise, but like looks wise, and even like Joaquin Phoenix. Looks wise, he's up there. I don't think acting wise he necessarily is, but he looks perfect for Kingpin. Wilson Fisk. And then I also think that Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, absolutely phenomenal casting choice. But overall, I think season 1 was a great start. I think it was more of like the thug stuff. It wasn't necessarily like big picture fights, you know what I'm saying? Whereas in season 2 and season 3, they kind of had like everything set up to a bigger thing, which in season 3 made sense because the final battle was a massive thing, which we'll talk about later. But season 1 overall, I will say the action choreography, I felt like it told the most story, especially with the introduction of Daredevil. I think since it was the beginning for the Daredevil character, at least for me as an audience member, I think that they really, really perfected it, and how it told the story, how it evolutionized, if that's a word, how it evolutionized Daredevil's character and Matt Murdock's character, and how we learned to love him a lot more. But overall, I thought the choreography in the show overall just tells a great story. And that's what I like so much about it, is because it doesn't feel like it's just action for action, you know? For example, like Arrow or The Flash. that's sometimes in those shows, like, it's just action for action. Same thing in the Titans show from clips that I've seen. And I've seen like large chunks of some episodes on YouTube where people are just like kind of describing stuff and how they don't like the fights for certain reasons. And most people are just saying that it's action for action. There's just so much going on, but it doesn't really tell a story. And I can tell you myself that season 1 Daredevil, the storytelling within the action really elevates Matt Murdock's character. I think that's why I like Matt Murdock so much. But moving on, and the final thing I want to talk about in season 1 is the subplots. Nelson and Murdock, that subplot, well, it's not necessarily a subplot, but it's still still a pretty big subplot. It's perfect. Like I mentioned before, the balance between being Daredevil and fighting crime and then the lawyer stuff, I think that's just perfect. Also, the subplot of just Matt and Foggy's relationship is just so good. Like, there's one episode where they just talk for like the entirety of the episode. There's like little to no action, and they're just talking the whole time. I love it so much. Just the chemistry between those two actors is phenomenal. And then also Ben Urich and Karen. I love their chemistry as well. Also Fisk and Karen, and then Fisk and Ben, and then just Fisk and everyone. Also the love interest between Vanessa and Fisk is so perfectly executed in my opinion. Vanessa really has like minimal screen time, at least in season 3. In season 1, she has a decent amount of screen time, but still nothing insane for being a villain's love interest. But I still care about her so much just because she's so integral to Fisk's story. She is literally why he's doing everything in the show. That she's the reason why he wants to get out of prison. She's the reason he wants to be free and lead New York, is so that she can have everything she wants, and because he wants her to live the best life possible. And for that reason, yes, obviously I can sympathize with him, but I just that's why I like that subplot so much. It's just so interesting to me. But yeah, now I want to talk about my favorite episode and my overall score for season 1. So my favorite episode of season 1 is the one that I mentioned before, Nelson v. Murdock. This is the entire dialogue scene or dialogue episode with just Nelson and Murdock, or Foggy and Matt, talking like the entire time. Matt finds out, Foggy finds out Matt's identity, and then they just have a whole episode talking about it. They talk about their backstory. We get to learn so much about their past, and overall it's just so well done, and it's perfectly placed within the season, because that's kind of when everything starts to ramp up near the end of the season. And so we learn so much about the relationship, and also the fact that Foggy knows that he has to hide it from Karen, and it's so perfectly executed in my opinion, and I really do love it. Overall, I'm gonna give Daredevil season 1 a 9 out of 10 overall. I think it's an absolutely phenomenal season of TV. It's one of my favorite TV seasons of all, or superhero TV seasons of all time. I will not say it's the best. I think that title goes to Daredevil season 3, but moving on, I want to talk about Daredevil season 2. So starting off, like I did before, with the villains, the Hand. These probably have to be my least favorite big bad villains in the entirety of the show. Obviously, the only two really big bads are Fisk and the Hand. I think the Hand was all right. I don't really like when an organization is a big bad, just because there's so much fighting goons and all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, with Fisk, there was a lot of fighting goons, but it didn't feel as prominent just because Fisk is one man, and it's kind of like you kill this one man and everything is over. Whereas with the Hand, it's like you have to battle all these people and all that kind of stuff. And then, but moving on to the other villains, I would say Elektra and Punisher are technically villains because he does have to fight them plenty of times, but they're more anti-heroes, so I don't really consider them that, but I'll talk about them more when I talk about side characters. So, side characters. Karen Page, starting it off, I love her love storyline with Matt. This love interest is absolutely phenomenally written in my opinion, and overall I have the same stuff to say about Karen as I did before. I think Karen's an almost perfect side character, an almost perfect love interest. At the end of the season, when Matt tells her that he's Daredevil, I didn't know that they do that. I don't even know about the comics if they do that or not, but I also love how they stay broken up. I love how that doesn't just convince her to go back to Matt because he's Daredevil. Like, and Matt knows not to take her back, obviously, because he puts her at a massive risk. And obviously, at the end of season 3, Fisk knows that Karen is Matt's friend, or like close friend, obviously. So that would also put Karen at risk in Matt's eyes. So overall, I think Karen's phenomenal. moving on to Foggy. I think again Foggy's an absolutely awesome character. I love his arc about his love interest as well. It's nothing prominent, but it's just funny to me how he has that girlfriend that's like really good looking, and she's like works at like a really prestigious lawyer firm, but he's stuck at Nelson and Murdoch, and they're like running out of money, they're going in debt, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just funny, the whole storyline, and obviously they end up together. But moving on to the two most interesting ones of this season, obviously Punisher. I think John Berthal plays him. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Again, one of my favorite comic book castings of all time. The Netflix universe as a whole just has some absolutely awesome castings. But yeah, and actually right when I finish recording this, I'm gonna go watch Punisher season 1 because I actually love his character so much. I really love the way they introduced him. He's kind of like a man in the shadows, a mercenary in the shadows. I also love the way they kind of took his character away. I kind of like the way that they kind of teased him becoming a little better, getting his stuff, like getting his entire life together, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, I just think it's so well done, so well so well put together, his storyline. Because also the subplot with Karen and Punisher, I'll talk about later when I talk about the subplots of this season. The subplot between Karen and Punisher is one of the best subplots in the entire show. Also, the trial of him is so good. The way it tears apart Matt Murdock's entire team, it literally tears apart Nelson and Murdoch. Overall, I just think Punisher is such a great catalyst for this season. Punisher really changes the season overall. I couldn't see a season 2 without Punisher. Also really transfers Matt's character, because they talk about so much stuff in season 2 between Punisher and Matt that really, like, you can see in season 3, it really affects Matt's character. Obviously, he doesn't talk about Punisher in season 3, but the stuff they talked about comes back in monologues and dialogues in season 3. They bring stuff up about killing and about, should I cross this line? Because Punisher's already crossed the line. There's no going back for Punisher, which is what I really love to see. But the last side character I want to talk about is Elektra. I have really mixed feelings about Elektra. I don't think she's a bad character at all. Obviously, I don't think really anyone does. I think the biggest issue with this season and why it's lower than the other 2 seasons is that there's just too much going on. I think the Hand and Elektra, I think that's just so much happening at once. Just the Hand in general plus Elektra in general. Elektra's connection to the Hand, obviously all the Punisher trial stuff going on. There's just so much stuff going on in this show in season 2. And so that's one of the biggest issues with it. And obviously Elektra has a big role in the issues. So that's why she's not my favorite character. But I still think writing wise, she's a phenomenal phenomenal actress who plays Elektra. I also think that her chemistry with Matt is phenomenal. I know I'm saying phenomenal a million times, but that's just the only word to describe it. I think it's awesome. But moving on, the acting of season 2. Okay, obviously, let's just get this out of the way. Matt Murdock / Daredevil. Like I said before, Charlie Cox is perfect for this role. I think Charlie Cox is Daredevil, but Punisher, John Berthal. Like I mentioned before, John Berthal is another one of my favorite comic book movie castings of all time. I want to talk about the main character, Matt Murdock, in this season specifically. I think the story surrounding Matt just wasn't as interesting because it depended on so many other characters. Whereas in seasons 1 and 3, obviously it depended on other characters. Season 3 depended on a lot of characters, but you still had the Matt Murdock redemption story in season 3. Like, can he come back from this? Season 1 is, can he do this in the first place? But season 2, there's not really a Matt Murdock storyline. There's like, can he balance his 2 lives? But I don't know, that just wasn't as interesting to me, especially since we already saw in season 1, he can already semi-balance the stuff. And so it was just really hard for me to get through this season just because of how much all the story was aside from Matt Murdock and Daredevil. Obviously, he was the thing keeping it at its core because you had the whole Elektra, the Hand storyline, then you had the Punisher, the lawyer, court case story side, all that kind of stuff. So he was that middle rock. But overall, there was nothing for his own storyline, I guess. There was only 2 stuff going off of him and nothing really 100% related to him. So that's kind of the only reason, that's kind of my only issue with Matt Murdock in this season and just the Daredevil writing in this season. It didn't feel like there was a story for him specifically, but now I want to talk about the action. Like I mentioned in season 1 when I talked about the action, the choreography is phenomenal. But I think this season, the storytelling within the action with not only Elektra, but mostly Punisher is so perfect. Also with Stick, I think it's great. I don't think it's anything super crazy, but I still think it's great. The storytelling within the action for Punisher and Daredevil, those fights are so entertaining. I'm like smiling, like excited, hype. Like I'm so happy whenever I get to watch those fights because I feel like I'm actually like they're telling a story of these two characters together. Like I honestly felt like Daredevil would die. There's like one scene on the rooftop where Daredevil and Punisher are fighting, and Punisher literally pulls a gun to his face and shoots him in the head. But obviously his mask just cracks open, and obviously he doesn't die. But like I felt like Punisher was gonna kill him because of how ruthless they wrote his character. But moving on, when I talk about the subplots, this season had so many subplots. Like there was just so much going on. Starting off with the Elektra and Daredevil love interest thing. I really liked it because it was kind of a love triangle thing, but at the same time, Karen didn't necessarily know about Elektra until she saw him in his bed after she was hurt. So I love that whole love triangle thing. It was subtle, yet still so much fun to see how that drama would work out. And it was the first time we really had like love drama in the show. And I really enjoyed that. I feel like every show needs a certain level of love drama, and no other season of the show did that. Moving on, Stick in the Hand. I also thought that whole storyline was cool. I just think it was a little too rushed towards the end. I felt like they were focusing so much on Punisher stuff, and then Punisher came back in the final episode to like shoot a sniper for like 2 minutes, and then he went away again. But overall, I think that the hand stuff, the stick stuff, it's cool. I think it was just rushed in. Nelson and Murdoch breaking apart is probably one of my favorite subplots in the entirety of the show, just because it really impacts the show a lot, especially on a deeper level. Punisher, just the Punisher storyline overall, awesome. And then Punisher and Karen, again, one of my favorite storylines in the entire show, and one of my favorite subplots in the entire show. It's really perfect, and I really feel engaged. And it's never like, they never try to push it to be some kind of love thing. It's like strictly always business, and Karen feels so bad for him. That's what I like. And I don't know, I just feel real emotion whenever I see that entire storyline playing along. But my favorite episode in this entire season 2 of Daredevil, my favorite show, is New York's Finest. This is another monologue/dialogue episode where Daredevil and Punisher are just sitting on the roof for like 15 minutes talking about who's gonna cross the line, or what crossing the line actually does to you. And this goes into the overall show's writing. I think the overall show's writing is phenomenal, as I mentioned before, but it's just, who are you? Where is the line? Once you cross that line, how do you get back? And have you already crossed your personal line? So overall, I think that's like the best episode. But overall in the show, or overall in the season 2, I'd overall give it an 8.7 out of 10. The reason I'm not giving it an 8.5 is because I still feel like an 8.5 is a little too low, but I think a 9 is just a little too high. So I'm going to give it an 8.7. I think that's a fair rating, so 8.7 out of 10. But moving on to season 3. This is my favorite season of superhero television ever made, and this is one of my favorite seasons of television I've ever watched in general. Before we start talking about season 3, disclaimer, like I mentioned before, I have not seen Defenders. So the reason I did not watch Defenders is just because I wanted to get through the show. I was so hyped after season 2, and then after I watched the recap, I went back and rewatched I watched the final episode of Defenders. Like, that's the only episode I watched because I kind of wanted to see how Matt died, and I wanted to see, I wanted to get all of the context behind his death. So I watched episode 1, the final episode of Defenders, and then I went directly into season 3, and that helped me a lot. Obviously, I already knew Matt died because I watched the recap, but I just wanted to see the stuff around it. But yeah, moving on, I want to talk about the villains as I do. Dex, Bullseye, perfect. Perfect. Like, there's nothing else you can say. He's just perfect. Like, he is so good. I love Dex. The guy who plays Dex is also a phenomenal actor. But I loved also how they teased him at the end to like actually become Bullseye. And I actually saved this quote so I could talk about it really quick. But basically, Charlie Cox said that before they canceled season 4 of Daredevil, they already had meetings about it. And he said, and I'm going to quote this from Charlie Cox, he said, "I was looking forward to Wilson Bethel," who I think is the actor for Dex, of getting to inhabit the character of Bullseye. Season 3 was kind of an origin story for the character and how Agent Poindexter becomes that character. So I was looking forward to having a season where he really embodies the Bullseye persona and what that dynamic would be between Bullseye and Daredevil. Now, the reason I love Bullseye's character so much is the symbolism of how he is the opposite of Daredevil. Daredevil left the suit behind not to leave his necessarily demons behind, but kind of what he believes. His faith in God was lost in the beginning of season 3. He doesn't necessarily like 100% gain him back, but his faith in God was lost, and so in that, his faith in the suit was lost. He is himself now. He doesn't need any protection. Obviously, he has the rope things, but it's not a whole suit. Like, you know what I'm saying? So Dex is like everything evil that Daredevil doesn't want to be. He's basically Daredevil's worst fear, and like Charlie Cox said, he wants to see what that opposition would be like for Daredevil. And with the action we already got in season 3, which I'll talk about later in this video, I just can't wait to see what they do in season 4, if they do one on Disney Plus, if they bring back Bullseye, if they do any of that kind of stuff. The action's gonna be crazy. But moving on, Fisk is obviously the big bad in season 3. Fisk is probably the best, most well-written Marvel villain in live action, in my opinion. The reason for this is because I just think Fisk is so compelling, like from a villainous standpoint, but also from a heroic standpoint. Like, I sympathize with him. Obviously they didn't delve as much into his backstory in this season because they already did it in season 1, and that's also another reason why I was really excited for if we had ever gotten to season 4, or if we ever will get a season 4, because we already have Dex's backstory here. We got to see all these flashbacks, so now he's Bullseye. It's kind of like an analogy. In season 1, it's Fisk, it's Wilson Fisk, but in season 3, like they said in the board meeting, it's Kingpin. That's what I like so much. It's just the evolution over time within the show is really well done, and I think that obviously is 100% part of the writing, and that's why I think this show is honestly almost perfect. But side characters, I think this episode had the best side characters in the entirety of the show. In this, honestly, Agent Nadeem might be one of my favorite TV show side characters of all time. But quickly, I want to get out of the way. Karen and Foggy. I think Karen is awesome. She's such a badass in this season. Her backstory is so well done, and I think she's an awesome side character. Foggy, I think Foggy's side storyline with him running for DA, that's also awesome. I think it was necessary for the story, but I also think that was the perfect storyline to give him, because you couldn't give him much because they don't obviously want to take away from Dex, Nadeem, Fisk, Karen, and Matt. Obviously, you don't want to take away from all of that. So I think him running for DA's office, that was the perfect writing choice for the character. But Agent Nadeem, okay, first of all, Indian representation, thank you so much, or Pakistani, I don't know what he is, but Asian representation, let's just say that. He's the family man that Fisk always wanted to be. He's so good at heart. I love him so much. I knew they were going to have to kill him off because he's just too good of a character. I knew it. And when they did, I was like, I saw that one coming. I was sad, but I was like, it had to happen. Like, come on. And also, his farewell video is so depressing, but the fact that it's still out there is still so cool to see. Like, his legacy lives on within everyone in New York, or at least in Hell's Kitchen. But the final character, or not final character, but another character is Sister Maggie. I thought the kind of reveal that Sister Maggie is Daredevil's mom, I didn't know that because I've never read the comics, so you guys might know that if you've read the comics, but that reveal is so good. It happens at the perfect time because Daredevil is just at the bottom. Like, he's losing his faith. Everything is going wrong, and he still steps up to the plate to become Daredevil and fight Fisk. And obviously that's what makes him a great hero. But the final character, obviously Dex, like I mentioned before, he resembles the demons in Matt. That's why I like his character so much. Moving on to the acting, I think Agent Nadeem, the guy who plays him, he's awesome. Guy who plays Dex, absolutely phenomenal. Guy who plays Matt Murdock, Mr. Charlie Cox, he is also phenomenal. I think this is his best season. Definitely Emmy worthy. I think the final scene, the final battle where he's like screaming at Fisk, he's like, "You don't get to decide who I am. Only God can. Like, you don't change who I am." Like that I know that impression was peak, but just the way he acts really embodies me. Really embodies Daredevil and really embraces me into the show. And like I mentioned before, I watched like the last 6.5 to 7 hours of Daredevil in one sitting. One of the main reasons for that is the acting in the show. I really felt as if I was immersed into the world, and it didn't feel like I was watching a show. It felt like I was watching real people. I know that sounds really cheesy and really stupid, but it's true. I never actually felt like I was just watching characters on a screen. I felt like I was watching real human human beings interact with one another, and that's why I liked it so much. But yeah, moving on quickly, I just want to glimpse over the main character. I always say it when I was reviewing every single season, but Matt Murdock, Daredevil, phenomenal main character, obviously. But moving on to the action, once again, the choreography is absolutely awesome. The final battle has to be one of my favorite superhero battles of all time. I think that the final battle is just so well choreographed. Like, there's so much going on because there's like obviously 3 people fighting at once. Daredevil is trying to protect Vanessa. Dex is trying to kill Vanessa. Daredevil is trying to kill Fisk, and Fisk is trying to kill everyone. And Vanessa is just trying to stay safe. There's just so much going on, and they choreograph it so perfectly. And overall, the storytelling in the fights in season 3 is also awesome. There's not as much like fighting for no reason, which I really do like, because the story, especially in this season, was really set forward. Obviously, there were subplots, which I'll talk about later, but the subplots didn't necessarily feel like they were subplots, as they felt so one-lined, which I really love, because this season really needed that. Like, I didn't want them to just focus on other stuff like they did in season 1, because season 1, that was fine. They were building up Fisk's character, they're building up other characters around the show so that the show could be even better and be lifted up. And in season 3, all of that comes to a close. The storytelling is so focused on Fisk that even side characters that have their own subplots, for example, Agent Nadeem and his FBI, like the FBI stuff and his family, all of that is directly centered, and it all ends at Fisk. That is where it all goes to. And so that's why I really like the action, because everything in the action side of things all leads to Fisk. It's not fighting for fighting. It's fighting for storytelling and moving forward the plot. So now I want to talk about subplots. Obviously, the Fisk getting out of jail. Now that whole thing of him in the penthouse, the protests, all of that is awesome. Also the Albanians and how that leads to the whole entire, that 10-minute one-shot scene. Beautiful. 10 minutes just staring at my screen. I did not look anywhere else. I was looking directly at my screen for 10 minutes straight, because that scene is so phenomenal. That jail scene, awesome. But the Dex storyline, like the Dex storyline with his girlfriend, the suicide hotline, that is awesome. So well written. I mean, it's not awesome, but you know what I'm saying. It's cool. It's a good storyline. It's not awesome that he has suicidal thoughts, but you know what I'm saying. So also the FBI, how he gets kicked off the FBI, and then they frame Agent Nadeem, and Agent Nadeem tries to get him back, and then he tries to go snoop around his apartment with Matt, and then he finds out, and then literally Dex kills Agent Nadeem. There's just so much that happens off of one small subplot. It just initiates so much more. That's what I love so much. And Agent Nadeem and the FBI, that storyline was also awesome. Fisk and Karen. So this subplot really made me feel like Karen could die. I'm gonna be honest. I genuinely felt like Karen just would have died. Like, it was so, like, that church scene literally felt like Karen could die this quick, but obviously she didn't. The Pope guy died instead of Karen. But also the final subplot is Foggy's campaign. Like I mentioned before, I thought this was perfect for Foggy's character. It really matches his character, also matches his whole storyline with his girlfriend and stuff like that. I love Foggy. I love his storyline. I thought this one was perfect just for his character. My favorite episode of season 3 has to be Revelations. Overall, I think this might be the best episode in the entire show. Overall, I'm going to give Daredevil season 3 a 9.5 out of 10. I think this is the best superhero TV season of all time, and I think this is one of the best TV shows ever made. So guys, now for my final take of the Daredevil show. This is not scripted, by the way. I have nothing written on my computer for my final take, and all I have to say is you need to watch the show if you haven't already. This is one of my favorite shows of all time, and it really just immersed me into the world. I think that Daredevil / Matt Murdock is one of the best live action superhero characters right now. I also think that he is the best Marvel character right now. I like writing wise, I don't know about comics and stuff like that, but TV show wise, I think he's the best character. I think he's the best written character in all of Marvel TV / movies. Everything out of the MCU, I think Daredevil is the best character. If we're including him in the MCU, I don't care. He is the best character in the MCU for considering him in there. I think he's the best. I think Fisk is one of the best villains of all time in live action superhero television. I think that Daredevil is one of the best characters in live action superhero television of all time. I could go on and on for days saying how good this show is, but you guys know it. I love this show. Let me know what you guys think of this show in the comments down below. And once I finish Punisher, I'll definitely be doing another podcast type of video like this one. Once my friend Brentley finishes watching the show, we'll be sure to talk about it on our podcast, Third Thoughts. You can click the link in the description down below if you want to check out the full playlist for the podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.